There is a moment, and I think every woman who has ever been betrayed knows exactly the one I mean, where the world goes completely, terrifyingly quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet where your ears are ringing and your hands are ice cold and your brain is doing something it has never done before. It is choosing. In that moment, I made my choice. And I want to tell you about it. Because what I did next is something I am not ashamed of. Not even a little. I had been home from the hospital for 11 days. My daughter was barely 2 weeks old, and I was still learning how to feed her, still terrified every time she made a sound I did not recognize, still bleeding and exhausted, and completely, utterly undone by love for this tiny person I had just brought into the world. My husband, Daniel, was supposedly working late. He had been working late a lot in those final weeks of my pregnancy, and I had told myself it was stress, that he was nervous about becoming a father, that men process things differently. I made excuses for him the way you make excuses for someone you have built your entire life around. That night, he left his phone on the kitchen counter when he went to shower. I was not snooping. I was standing right there, bouncing our daughter against my chest because she would not stop crying. And the screen lit up, and I saw a name I did not recognize, and a message that was not meant for a man who had a wife and a newborn at home. I will not repeat what it said, but I understood immediately what it meant. Here is what I did not do. I did not scream. I did not confront him when he walked back into the kitchen, smelling like my shampoo, smiling at me like everything was normal, reaching out to take our daughter from my arms. I handed her to him. I said I needed a glass of water. And I stood at the kitchen sink with the tap running, and I breathed, and I thought, and I made my choice. I was not going to blow this up. Not when I was 11 days postpartum and had no job because I had taken leave, no plan, no leverage, and a husband who did not yet know that I knew. Information, I realized in that moment, is power. And right then, he had all of it and I had none. I was going to change that. Over the next 3 days while Daniel was at work, I read every single message on that phone. He had left his passcode on a sticky note inside his nightstand drawer. He had always been careless about things like that, and I had always been the one who remembered everything. Her name was Cassandra. She was 31, 2 years younger than me. She worked in his office. She had been in his life, in that way, for approximately 4 months, which meant it had started when I was 7 months pregnant. I read everything. Every message, every photo, every voice note he had transcribed, because he was too lazy to listen to them during meetings. I read what he told her about me. I read what he said he missed. I read what he said he wished his life looked like. And I took notes. Not metaphorical notes. Actual notes. In a little notebook I bought and kept in the bottom of the diaper bag, because he would never, ever look there. This is the part people find hardest to believe. They ask me, how were you not destroyed? How did you function? And the honest answer is that my daughter saved me. Every time I felt the grief trying to swallow me whole, I looked at her face and I thought, not yet. You do not get to fall apart yet. She needs you whole. And so I stayed whole. What I learned from those messages was specific and detailed, and, in a way that I am not proud of but will not apologize for, incredibly useful. I learned what Daniel had been telling Cassandra he missed in our marriage. I learned the exact language he used when he felt desired versus when he felt taken for granted. I learned his insecurities, things I already knew, but seeing them written out in his own words to another woman gave them a new and clinical clarity. I learned what made him feel like a man, what made him feel small, and what made him feel irresistible. And then I built a plan. It took me about 2 weeks to figure out the full shape of it. By the end of those 2 weeks, I had also made a quiet appointment with a family law attorney, a woman named Patricia, who had an office 20 minutes from our house and who I paid for in cash from my personal savings account. Patricia told me exactly what I was entitled to under our state's divorce laws. She told me about asset division. She told me about custody. She told me what documentation I should be gathering and how to gather it without tipping him off. She was calm and precise, and she looked at me across her desk and said, "Take your time. There is no rush. The law will be here when you are ready." I left her office and I went home and I started becoming someone new. Or rather, I started becoming the version of myself that Daniel had apparently been looking for in someone else. Now, I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. I am not saying I changed myself for him. I am saying I studied him the way you study an opponent, and I used what I found. Every woman has reserves of herself she has not fully deployed. I simply chose which ones to bring forward and when and why. And my reason was not love. My reason was strategy. The first month, I focused on presence. I had been so consumed by the pregnancy and then the newborn haze that I had become almost invisible in my own home, a function, not a person. I started being in the room with him again. Not desperately, not clingily. I remembered the things he had told Cassandra he craved. Feeling noticed, feeling chosen, feeling like he was someone's priority. I made him feel all of those things. The way a surgeon makes an incision, precise, and with a specific outcome in mind. The second month, I watched the confusion begin. He started coming home earlier. He started putting his phone face down on the table when we ate together, which he had not done in months. He started looking at me differently. That particular look, the one I recognized from the early years of our relationship, the one that used to make me feel like the only person in any room. I cataloged every sign and I did not let myself feel anything about it except tactical satisfaction. By the third month, I had confirmed through a combination of careful observation and one very deliberate conversation that his contact with Cassandra was becoming less frequent. He was pulling back from her. I could tell by the shift in his energy, the way guilt looks different from distance on a person you have known for 8 years. He was starting to feel something again in our home, and it was disrupting whatever he had built with her. Here is the part. One, have never told anyone, and I am only telling it now because I think it matters for you to understand the full picture. There was a night somewhere in the 4th month when he held me while our daughter slept between us, and he said, quietly, that he felt like he was falling in love with me all over again. And something in me cracked, not broke, cracked, because I had loved this man. I had loved him genuinely and completely, and there was still some small, stubborn piece of me that felt the warmth of those words before the rest of me remembered exactly why I was there. I let the crack close. I smoothed it over. I said something soft and let him hold me, and I stared at the ceiling in the dark, and I thought about Patricia's office and the folder in the bottom of my diaper bag and the apartment I had quietly toured the week before, a 2-bedroom, good school district, available on the 1st of the following month. I put down a deposit the next morning. Month 5 was the most difficult, not because I wavered, I did not waver, but because the performance had become so seamless that I occasionally had to remind myself it was a performance. That is a strange and disorienting thing, to be so good at something that you lose track of where the act ends. I kept going back to the notebook. I kept rereading the messages, not to torture myself, but to remember. The notebook was my anchor to reality when the warmth of a functional household threatened to make me forget what had been done to me in the dark while I was growing his child. He ended the affair in month 6. I know the exact date because he was distracted all morning and then came home that evening looking like a man who had just put down a very heavy bag. He did not tell me about it. Of course he did not. I had been watching him closely enough that I could read the specific texture of his guilt and his relief. That night, he was more tender with me than he had been in years. He kept touching my face. He said he loved me more than he could explain. He said he did not deserve me. He had no idea how right he was. I had asked Patricia to have the papers ready. I had signed them 2 weeks prior, and they had been sitting in a sealed envelope in the bottom of my work bag, waiting. My sister had the moving van arranged. My best friend had taken the day off work. The apartment was furnished. My daughter's room had a mobile above the crib that played the song she liked, and I had tested it twice to make sure it worked. The morning after he ended the affair, I got up early. I let him sleep in, because I had always let him sleep in on Saturdays and I did not want to change a single variable. When he came downstairs, still soft with sleep, smiling at me across the kitchen the way a man smiles when he believes he has everything he wants, I handed him a mug and I looked at him clearly. No performance, no strategy, just me, just the woman he had betrayed 11 days after she came home from the hospital. And I said, "I need you to read something." I put the envelope on the counter between us. He did not understand at first. He picked it up the way you pick up something you are not worried about, with one hand, still holding his coffee. He opened it slowly. I watched his face move through confusion, then disbelief, then something I can only describe as a total systems failure. The look of a person whose entire understanding of their current reality has just been surgically removed. He said my name. Just my name, the way you say it, when you are hoping the sound of it will stop time. I told him I knew. I told him I had known since 11 days after our daughter was born. I told him I had read every message, that I had taken notes, that I had spent 6 months making him fall back in love with me, not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted him to understand, in his bones, exactly what he had thrown away. I wanted him to feel the loss of something he believed was real. I wanted the rug pulled out from under him, the same way he had pulled it out from under me, except I had the decency to do it when he was standing upright, instead of when I was bleeding and exhausted and holding a 2-week-old baby. I am not going to pretend he did not. He cried and he begged and he said things that, 6 months earlier, would have broken me in half. He said he had been stupid and selfish, and that he had come back to me because he loved me, that what he felt now was real, that we could fix it. He said our daughter needed us together. He said he would do anything. I told him what he could do. He could cooperate with the divorce. He could be a present and loving father. He could sign the papers without making it ugly, and in return I would be civil and fair and we would build a functional co-parenting relationship for our daughter's sake. I told him the marriage was done, not because I hated him, but because I had spent 6 months doing the work of deciding, and I was decided. My sister arrived at 10. My best friend arrived at 10:15. The moving van was outside by 10:30. He sat at the kitchen table and watched us carry out boxes, and he did not try to stop it, because I think some part of him understood that stopping it was not something he had any right to do. By noon, I was standing in my new apartment with my daughter on my hip and afternoon light coming through the window of her room and that little mobile turning slowly above the crib. And I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt like myself, not a mother performing wellness for a man who did not deserve it. Just myself, in a room I had chosen, with the person I loved most in the world in my arms, and nothing behind me that I had not already decided to leave. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Patricia was right. The law was there when I was ready. I received half of our shared assets, which was more than enough to establish myself and my daughter comfortably. Daniel sees her every other weekend and on Wednesday evenings. He is, to his credit, a good father in the hours he is given. I do not know what happened with Cassandra. That chapter closed the moment I handed him the envelope, and I have not opened it since. People ask me if I regret the 6 months. If I regret not leaving immediately, not screaming, not burning it all down the night I found out. And I understand the question. There is a version of this story where I do all of those things, and maybe it is more satisfying to watch. But that version of the story does not have me standing in my new apartment at noon on a Saturday feeling like myself. That version has me scrambling, reactive, raw, negotiating from a position of pain instead of power. I chose it deliberately, and I chose it for my daughter, and I chose it for the woman I was before I let myself become invisible in my own life. And I would choose it again. There is one more thing I want to say, and then I am done. In those 6 months, the thing that kept me most anchored, more than the notebook, more than Patricia's folder, more than the deposit receipt for the apartment, was a single, quiet understanding that I came to very early on. Daniel had looked at me, a woman who had just given birth to his child, a woman who was exhausted and vulnerable and completely open, and he had decided that was the moment to seek warmth somewhere else. He had looked at my most unguarded self and found it insufficient. So I showed him my most deliberate self, my most capable, most strategic, most fully realized self. I let him fall in love with that woman, and then I took her with me when I left. I do not need him to understand it. I do not need anyone to understand it. But if you are sitting somewhere right now reading this and you are in that kitchen sink moment, the tap running, the world quiet in that specific terrible way, I just want you to know, you have more time than you think. You have more options than you think. And the version of you that comes out the other side of this, if you let yourself be strategic instead of just reactive, is someone you are going to be very glad to meet. I am glad